Well, I'm currently coaching the Wilberforce Speech and Debate Club, coaching team policy debate, and I'm coaching impromptu. And as when I have extra time, I also coach the Lincoln Douglas value debate. So.
And how did your club come to be called the Wilberforce?
Well, my parents have always really respected William Wilberforce. They have really delved into studying the history of the abolitionist movement. So we wanted a figure who we could seek to emulate, who stood for something that had great moral significance, namely the freedom of slaves and the value of every human being. And we thought William Wilberforce was a great person to personify that. Trading with a nation does not necessarily grant them moral legitimacy. And I think the problem that a lot of people have when they argue that sanctions or tariffs or something like that are good because it stands up for the right moral thing, I think that's a mistake because it simply empowers the government. You can trade with the people without without affirming the moral legitimacy of that government. In fact, as Margaret Thatcher argued, if you trade with a communist nation or with a tyrannical nation, you are empowering the masses to rise up eventually and overthrow that government. So I think trade is one of the most powerful forces out there in favor of freedom and everything that America stands for, or at least should stand for.
Great. When you were high school age, did you ever come to a fee or an economic thinking debate seminar?
Yes, I attended Applying Liberty, and there was another fee seminar as well. I don't remember the name. But I really appreciated how the fee speakers took these philosophical concepts and applied them to real-life examples. For example, in one of the seminars, Doug Bandlow spoke about foreign policy, which is one of my favorite topics. And it was very interesting to hear him talk about sanctions on North Korea, trade policy with China, and really apply a freedom-minded foreign policy to real-world circumstances, to practical situations.
Were you high school age when you attended one of the fee seminars?
Yes, I was 18.
Okay, so most of that.
Well, my personal debate philosophy is you have to work for it. So I encourage my students to research all the different sides of the issue as thoroughly as possible, and then we have at it in the debate meetings. I think fortunately the students come to understand, even with biases against liberty-minded principles, eventually after looking at all the different sides, begin to see the proper policies and begin to actually formulate a consistent philosophy, which is usually in favor of freedom.
So in that
Switched their case for regionals, and they chose a unilateral free trade case, getting rid of all tariffs towards India. And the way that they focused the round was talking about American consumers. Because I think, and what I think debaters begin to understand is that you have a lot of one-sided arguments in the media, for example, that jobs are being lost, but you also forget the other side of the picture, that, products become cheaper, and you become much more efficient, and people can do other things. It encourages innovation, but it also ends up making everyone's life easier in the long run. The students, when they look at these foreign policy issues, I've always encouraged, since I come from more of a philosophical mindset, I've always encouraged them to try and come up with a consistent philosophy, and it's neat to see students actually do that, look at what socialism has done in India, and then apply it to what socialism could do in America and what it is doing in America. They have many problems in there, both social and economic, because the government has taken away responsibility from the people. And it's very exciting to see students have this click in their mind that what's happening in India is starting to happen in the United States, and that's a serious problem, and we need to act on that. I encourage all my students to read Bastiat's The Law. It's when I was debating, it was definitely one of the essays I used the most, and would test a lot of my different philosophies against. Not that I treated it as the Bible, but I do see a lot of wisdom in what Bastiat was arguing for. I think that it's time that people with a liberty-minded worldview take the offensive and start influencing world policy, because we are living in a globalized world, and what happens in Brussels is going to affect the United States. And I think it's important that we have people standing up with moral convictions and saying this is wrong, we cannot do this. As when conservatives and indeed liberals, they have, I think, for the most part, good intentions. The problem is they don't understand that the government can't solve those problems through coercion. Nations and peoples have to take responsibility for their own problems. And well, that these environmentalists want to uphold the circle of life, but really it's a circle of death, because when you eliminate energy, when you tell their nations what to do, especially when it comes to energy, it ends up killing people because they can't get easy access to the resources or the energy they need to grow crops, or just simply to get heating or clean. Have a philosophy that is based upon a firm moral position, a position of freedom, a position of responsibility, a position of personal sovereignty. And I really appreciate how Fee has encouraged me to really think through this and understand that an inconsistent philosophy isn't going to cut it. An inconsistent philosophy is actually going to land us in a lot of trouble. We need a consistent philosophy based on the right moral foundation.
Great. And maybe to conclude, just introduce yourself and say your debate club again. So.
I'm Josiah Weekly, and I coach the Wilberforce Speech and Debate Club for team policy and impromptu speech.